profile here. We leave it, you know, under construction so you can see how a ship was manufactured back in the day. All right, so here we got a sweep of flags. They start with Ponce de Leon's flag and go all the way to Old Glory. And so, again, I encourage you to stick around. We're open to 5, and it's fun to read about all the flags, but they just cover what I'm talking about in flags. And one of the more notable ones that I like, the third one is I'll just point a few out, is Sir Francis Drake's flag. So he was a scourge of the Spanish, a famous pirate. He was a hero to the British. Beat the Spanish Armada in 1588 on behalf of Queen Elizabeth, and he came and burned St. Augustine down in 1586, burnt everything. He was looking for treasure, like revenue, like the war chest of the governor, and he never got it. And out of vengeance, he came with like 2,000 pirates. One of the things, if you haven't gone up the Watchtower, go right there at the beginning. Some people don't notice. It's one of the first things that would have been built when you came in where you bought your tickets. You can look out over the fort and just imagine Sir Francis Drake appearing on the horizon. It would have been exactly the same. Next stop, Europe, when you're looking out that way with 2,000 pirates back in 1586. Okay, so our destination is over on the other side of the ship. And I've got some, looks like we got some kids waiting for a cannon firing. So let's head on over and sit on these benches over here. But on the way by, I want you to take in the ship because I'm going to talk about it. So Marshall, give me a few minutes. We're just going to talk about the ship a little bit and then we'll do the game. We're going to join you. Yeah, you come. And the map. The route. Okay. Yeah, you can see some books. Ready to see the map. Have you looked at the map yet? No, we just got it. Okay, cool. All right, so, I mean, Marshall probably told you in your introduction about Menendez, right?
I didn't have a chance to do much of it.
Oh, okay, so St. Augustine is all about a guy named Pedro Menendez at the beginning, because he was the explorer who came and founded St. Augustine back in 1565. So, on the map, we show the way he came. And one of the reasons why we like to show it on a map like this is because I want you to imagine then what it was like to be on a ship like this, coming 3,000 miles along this red line back in the day. You know about Columbus, right? So that's pretty much the way he came. And he ended up in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean, when he came. And that's when we first knew pretty much, you know, people say the Vikings were here too before, but that's first when we really knew about the New World. North America, where the United States is and Canada, right? Central America, now the biggest country and always in the news today is Mexico, in Central America, right? And then South America, that was the New World, right? Now South America, big country in South America. My son-in-law is from Brazil, and it was settled by the Portuguese, so he speaks Portuguese. So back in the day, Spanish, Portuguese, French, English, Dutch, they're all coming across the ocean on ships like this. Can you imagine? Now, let me tell you about this ship. It's not like, you know, you see these luxury liners, you know, when people go on trips, you know, to the Bahamas. It's not like you go down to your stateroom and have a nap, right? There's only one deck, and you're on the deck, exposed to the sun and the rain for like 1 to 3 months with 15 to 20 other people. Think that would be fun? Yeah, well, it might have been. And it's amazing that most of these people actually survived. I mean, sometimes they, you know, had trouble, and the navigation wasn't very good. I mean, I've mentioned the people on the public tour, I think, at the beginning, that a lot of people don't realize, and so when you're looking at the map, so you kids probably know, you have lines that go like this around the Earth. They're latitude lines. They're called parallels, right? And they tell you where you are north and south on the Earth, right? Okay? 30 degrees south of the equator. Sound familiar? All right, then you have the longitude lines. They go like this. Now, they don't show any on this map. And they tell you where you are east and west. So, like, if you're in China, you're in the far east, you know, so you're like, you know, 180 degrees of longitude from over here, right? And back in the day, when the ships were out in the middle of the ocean, they knew where they were in this dimension. They didn't really know in this dimension. And so they had what they call the longitude problem. And I'll leave it for homework to study how they solved it. But there's a fascinating book for the adults. It's, you know, a little beyond the kids at this point. But when you get older, you can read about it. It describes how they solved the longitude problem. And it was a big problem because ships would run aground, ships would be out at sea too long because they frankly didn't really know where they were, east and west. And so it wasn't until there was a competition that was instituted by the British Parliament, and like $1 million in today's currency was offered to the person who could solve the longitude problem. And I'll cut to the chase. The story's fascinating because it wasn't one of these nerd astronomers like Galileo who solved the problem. It was a common carpenter clockmaker named Harrison. He was a genius. And the key was, no one thought you could get a clock accurate enough to go on a ship with you back in the day, so you could always know what time it was where you'd left. Because, you know, on a rolling ship in clocks with pendulums and gears, you're losing or gaining time over temperature and humidity. I mean, think about clocks. I mean, time on a ship was originally an hourglass. How accurate was that? Yeah. But then if you took a clock on land and put it on a ship back in the day, it had too many moving parts. So this guy Harrison figured out how to come up with a clock. It was called the marine chronometer that didn't have a lot of moving parts. It was a genius. So if you get a chance, you don't even have to Google it. Just remember longitude. And you don't even have to read the book. There's a book about it because there's an Amazon Prime movie about it. Stars Jeffrey Rush and Jeremy Irons. So Jeffrey Rush plays the guy. You know, a couple of, so you know, Google. It's like, you know, $3 on Amazon Prime. All right. Should we fire the cannon?
Excellent.
All right. So let's go sit on those benches over there. Any questions about the ship? Okay, so yeah, so it's a full-scale replica. You know, give or take a couple of feet. There was a design called the Caravel that the Portuguese came up with back in the day, and the Nina and the Pinta. You know, I have people come through who've seen the Nina and Pinta, and they verified about the same size, maybe a little bigger. So those were Columbus's ships. So it wasn't a big ship, but they liked it because it was maneuverable, it keeps the weird, and it had what they call the shallow draft. So when you get to where you're going, you're not going to run aground going up rivers or anything. So it's possible.
Oops.
All right. So where are you kids from? What was it? Sanibel? Oh, Sanibel, Island? Oh, nice. Well, welcome to St. Augustine. All right, so we're going to have a little artillery lesson. All right. And you'll be a participant when we light it. We'll all say fuego together. That's fun. Favorite part of my day, actually. Okay. So, but let me give you a little artillery lesson. So, what you'll learn as you continue on the tour is you'll learn that, and you can read it on some of the signs. I mean, the city was under attack a lot. So, St. Augustine was under attack. The pirates came, like Sir Francis Drake and Robert Searles. You can learn about them in the Pirate Museum. And then the British were always trying to undermine the Spanish. They were actually constantly at war with the Spanish, it seems, until, you know, there was a British period here. They were still kind of at war, but the British kind of came. Sort of interesting how that developed. But the whole theme here is that city was under attack. And so they would have needed cannons to defend the city. And when you go to the fort, you'll see big ones. And we've got a small one over here. It's a 3-pounder. We actually have a relic of an 8-pounder over there. See that barrel that's rusted? Yeah. So I mean, you get an appreciation for the scale of these things. And when I say 3-pound, 8-pound, 16-pound, I'm actually talking about the weight of the cannonball. So a 16-pound cannon, 16 pounds of iron. Yeah. Can you imagine loading that in a big barrel? And then, can you imagine putting in about 8 pounds of gunpowder so that you can launch it a couple of miles? I mean, these guys must have been deaf. Now, when we fire this thing, it's actually not that loud. I'm not trying to, you know, get you worried about the sound of it. So we're gonna light some gunpowder, but it won't be like back in the day. I'm just trying to, you know, portray what it's like. And so, you know, the Castillo would have had big cannon. I mean, if Sir Francis Drake, he appeared in 1586. If the Castillo had been built, maybe they've been firing some cannonballs at him to try to get his ships out at sea. But the one we're going to fire was actually used more on land. You can see it's on wheels, right? And so I'll give you a range of this. It's about a third of a mile, 500 yards, 5 football fields, right? Just give you some scale to that. And when you think about that, that's a great, what they call a force multiplier. You know, if you're battling the British, if you got something that fires 500 yards and they have muskets that only go 100 yards, then it was a good defense to have. And so it was popular. It was used on the gun decks of ships. In fact, you'll see at the Pirate Museum, we have one where you can do a little audio simulation over there. So we'll go through all the steps of what they would do back in the day. A gun crew. Well, it wouldn't be the solo fellow, but a crew of folks to get the cannon ready. Let's pretend I just fired it, and I'm going to fire it again. So now I'm going to go through all the steps to get it ready to fire. So I got these long rods, and they all have different names, and they have different functions. So the first one is pretty simple. It was called a sponge. So it's cloth wrapped around the rod, imagine dipped in water. So I got a nice sponge here. And that was so I could swab out the barrel to make sure there aren't any little bits of fire left over from the last shot. So it's a safety precaution so that the cannon doesn't blow up in my face if I put more gunpowder back. Right? So that was a big deal. They had to do that first. Then they would scrape it off. They would scrape it out with what was called the worm. So we had the sponge, now we have the worm, spiral piece of iron, looks kind of like a worm. And when they put gunpowder and cannonball in here, they'd also put something called wadding in. And some of that would be left over after the explosion. It was something they used as a seal with the cannonball, and they'd have to scrape it out. So they'd use the worm. This is all happening really quickly. You know, everyone's got an assignment. Then they would go get gunpowder from the magazine. That's where they stored it. It would come in a cloth sack to keep it dry until you needed to use it. But now we're going to use it. So they spike it, put a hole in it. And then we take the sack of gunpowder and we pour it into a big spoon. So use your imagination. Imagine there's a receptacle, like, you know the term a ladle, you know, like for soup. So it was called the ladle. You can see one in the Fire Museum, a good replica one over there. But just imagine now I'm pouring all the gunpowder into that spoon. I ladle it down the barrel, turn it to the side, dump it down in what's called the breech of the cannon right here. Right on top of the breech is a hole, about a half-inch diameter hole. It's called the touch hole, and that's where we're going to light this. Now, while you folks were in the house, I put a few ounces down the touch hole, so it's like a fuse, right? So back in the day, we'll see. We'll put the matchstick there, so we'll light it. That goes off, lights the gunpowder down below, and out comes the cannonball. So back in the day, we put a cannonball in now with some wadding, and then we'd use the ramrod to compress it down with the gunpowder. So we're ready to light this. So while you folks were in the house, I prepared to fire the cannon. I lit my matchstick. So this is how they lit it back in the day. They'd get slow-burning rope, and they'd have it suspended from a little piece of iron here so they can get a little distance from the touch hole and light the cannon. Now, where's the gentleman who wanted to light? What's your name?
Josh.
Josh, do you really want to do it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so come on up here. So let's help Josh fire the cannon. Now, here's the drill. I'll give Josh a little training. So you're going to stand over here, and we get your distance, right? And you can see you're just going to put it right in the middle of that hole. And it's going to go off. And I usually kind of look that way, just as a precaution. All right, so come stand over here. Don't do anything until we give you the cue. Now, if you want to get, yeah, good. So you're going to get a good, nice profile shot of this. You know, when we're standing here, we can't really see the flame, but usually broadside you can see it, so it's good. And if you put the video on slow-mo, it's kind of cool too. All right, so here's what we're going to do. So we're going to set them up to put that thing down and light it, but we'll practice first the sequence. So I'll say fire in the hole, you say fuego. So we're just practicing, don't do it. Fire in the hole!
Fuego!
Good, let's do it again. Fire in the hole!
Fuego!
All right, this is for real. So I'm going to say fire in the hole, they say fuego, you light it.
I'm going to say fuego after
Good. Why don't you say it as you're doing it so everyone can sort of time their camera when you say fuego. Well, it's the same with us, just get close. You ready? Fire in the hole!
Fuego!
Good job, Josh. Fire in the hole!
Viva los baños!
Viva España! Yes, Michael. All right, kids. Have a good tour.
Alright, so my group, if you would please follow me.
All right, so
Can't hear how them like.
yeah, that's a pretty good blast. I'm glad I did.
I can do that all day every day.
Yeah, I do. Yes. My favorite part. Good for you. All right, so actually there's one little bit of the artillery lesson before we close out here. So it turns out that in the case where the enemy is winning, in this case, let's say I was a Spaniard and the English are winning, and they're coming. It's bad for me and my comrades. We're going to have to surrender. They're going to get the cannon, so they don't want the enemy to use the cannon against some other Spaniards, and so they do what was called spike the cannon. And they had matchsticks that actually had a spike, basically a piece of iron embedded in the rod like this. I think we have one in the blacksmith shop. And they take that spike and they jam it in that touch hole where we lit it and break it off. So there's a piece of iron lodged in the light.